The Great Brinks Robbery. How $2.7 million disappeared in 17 minutes. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. On a cold January night in 1950, Boston sat under a blanket of snow. The streets were quiet, but inside one building on Prince Street, something was boiling. The Brinks building, secure, impenetrable, or so they thought. At 6:55 p.m., 13 men in navy blue coats and chauffeur caps crept through the alley. Their breath steamed in the cold air. Their faces were hidden behind Halloween masks. Silence surrounded them, except for one thing: they carried guns. And they had a plan. The front door of Brinks was always locked, reinforced, bolted. But that night, it wasn't. A mistake? No. An inside job? Very likely. They didn't knock. They didn't hesitate. They walked in. Inside, 5 employees were counting money. They didn't expect guests, especially not ones pointing .45 caliber pistols. Within seconds, the robbers were in control. No shots fired. No alarms tripped. Every movement had been rehearsed. One robber grabbed the employees and forced them against the wall. Another herded them into a back room. Their hands were bound with tape, eyes blindfolded. No names, no voices, just orders. Sharp, clear, cold. Within minutes, the crew moved to the counting room. Cash stacked in neat bundles, coins bagged and sorted. They moved like ants, fast, precise. Bags of cash were swept into duffel bags. They didn't talk. They didn't stop. They knew they had 17 minutes. 17 minutes before a routine check would raise questions. 17 minutes before someone realized something was wrong. And in that time, they pulled off what would become the biggest robbery in U.S. history. $2.7 million in cash, coins, and checks vanished. Just like that, back in the alley, the getaway truck waited. Engine running, doors open. The robbers exited the building like ghosts. Not one fingerprint, not one shred of clothing, not even a dropped coin. By 7:12 p.m., they were gone. The heist was over, but the story had just begun. When police arrived, they found chaos. Dazed employees, empty vaults, locked doors from the inside. The robbers had vanished into thin air. No witnesses, no clues. What the robbers didn't know was that they had triggered one of the largest manhunts in FBI history. And at the center of it, a man named Joseph Big Joe McGinnis, ex-con, smooth talker, master planner. He wasn't new to crime, but this was different. Big Joe had recruited a team of professionals. Each man had a role, a skill, a secret. For months, they studied the Brinks building, watched guards, memorized routines, found the weaknesses. It was military-level precision, and it worked. As investigators swarmed the crime scene, questions flooded in. How did the robbers get inside? Who disabled the alarm? Why no fingerprints? But the biggest question was simple: where was the money? The newspapers called it the crime of the century. The public was captivated. How could 13 men disappear with millions in cash? Police had theories. Too many. Inside job? Mob involvement? Corrupt Brinks staff? Leads came and went, but none stuck. The case turned cold. Weeks passed, then months. The city moved on, but the FBI didn't, and neither did one man, Agent Henry Morse. He wasn't flashy, didn't care for headlines, but he was relentless. Morse studied the case files day and night. He built profiles, tracked movements, dug into every rumor. He believed the robbers were still in Boston, lying low, spending quietly, waiting, and he was right. But uncovering them would take more than hunches. It would take betrayal, greed, and a critical mistake, one that would take years to come. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a ticking time bomb, and the countdown had just begun. Boston had seen crime, but nothing like what was about to unfold. Not in the heart of its business district. Not under the watch of the most secure armored facility in the region. It was January 17th, 1950, a Monday, cold, the kind of cold that bites through gloves and stiffens the bones. But for the men preparing for the job of their lives, it wasn't just another cold night. It was go time. At 6:55 p.m., the Brinks building on Prince Street was nearing shutdown. Most employees had clocked out. Only a handful of trusted workers remained inside, counting and storing the day's intake. Upstairs, the vaults were closing. Downstairs, alarms and security systems were warming up. Everything was running as it should. That was the problem. 11 men had been planning this robbery for over 2 years. Yes, 2 years. This wasn't a smash and grab. It was methodical, meticulous, military-level planning. The leader? Joseph Big Joe McGinnis. Career criminal, ex-con, strategist. He didn't pull triggers himself. He pulled strings. He had a crew made up of Anthony Pino, a fence, great with logistics. Stanley Gusciora, soft-spoken, brilliant with locks. James Gaston Faherty, hot-tempered, but loyal. Vincent Costa, getaway driver. Henry Baker, gunman. Adolph Jazz, Maffey, loud, fearless. Thomas Richardson, lookout. Joseph Specs, helped with forging and supplies. Michael Vincent Geegan, muscle. James I. Bananas McGinnis, no relation to Big Joe but critical. All of them had records. Some had done time. Others were connected to the Boston underworld. But none had ever tried anything on this scale. Until now, the genius of the operation, it wasn't just brute force. It was intelligence. Someone in the crew had worked inside Brinks. He knew the schedules, the blind spots in security, which guards were lazy, which vaults stayed open longer than others, and how the cash was rotated at the end of each day. They learned the delivery routes, timed how long the vaults stayed open, watched guard changes, not for weeks, for months. And when they were ready, they practiced. They rented a nearby garage, built a life-size replica of the vault, and rehearsed it over and over. They knew the job had to take no longer than 20 minutes. In and out. No hostages. No bullets. No mistakes. 6:55 p.m. The street outside Brinks was dark. Traffic light. No patrols. The door to the side alley was their entry point. The lock had been duplicated weeks before. 6 men moved in, wearing navy blue chauffeur uniforms, rubber Halloween masks, gloves, rubber-soled shoes. They carried 2 revolvers, 2 shotguns, rope, canvas bags, and nerves of steel. They entered silently, no alarms triggered. The guards inside taken completely off guard. Some were tied up, others forced to the floor. No one was harmed. The robbers knew exactly where the money was. Not just cash, securities, checks, money orders. Everything. Vault after vault. Bag after bag. They loaded millions in minutes. 17 minutes total. $2.775 million. The equivalent of over $32 million today. It was 7:12 p.m. They exited exactly as they entered. Quiet, fast, organized. No shouting. No dragging bags down the street. Just a simple, inconspicuous Ford truck, repainted, fake plates. They vanished into Boston traffic, blended into the city, untraceable, unseen. When the Brinks employees finally untied themselves and called police, it was already too late. The biggest robbery in American history had just happened, and no one knew who did it. When Boston police arrived, they were stunned. There were no fingerprints, no blood, no shell casings, just some discarded rope and tape. The alarm systems, untouched. Vaults, intact. It was like the robbers had keys, like they had been there before. Detectives examined the scene for hours. Dozens of officers, then FBI agents, were called in. Who could do this? Why no violence? How did they bypass 2 security doors, guards, and time locks? By morning, the headlines exploded. $2.7 million robbery stuns nation. The perfect crime? Brinks heist. FBI joins hunt. It wasn't just a local crime now. It was national. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. Radio hosts debated it. Papers printed hourly updates. Boston was locked in fear and fascination. Some said it was the mob. Others thought it was ex-military. One psychic even claimed the robbers would be found in the sewers of South Boston. But the truth? No one had a clue. The feds knew the first 48 hours were critical. But they had nothing. No leads. No suspects. No footage. The money, uncirculated bills and checks, was useless unless it could be laundered. They knew the robbers would lay low. So the FBI began watching the usual suspects. Bank tellers, local crime families, anyone with a sudden interest in real estate. But nothing came up. The Brinks robbers had gone underground. Deep underground. After the heist, the 11 men disappeared. They didn't meet, didn't call, didn't celebrate. Everything was split up and hidden. Some buried cash. Others hid it in safety deposit boxes. One allegedly stuffed bills into a false ceiling above his kitchen. They had one rule: no spending, no flashing, no mistakes. And for a while it worked. But paranoia crept in. Some wanted more than their share. Others feared betrayal. The silence became heavy. The trust began to crack. The FBI did something bold. They waited and watched. They figured no one could stay quiet forever. Greed would do what evidence couldn't: crack the crew from within. They were right, but it would take 6 long years. By early 1956, a whisper finally reached investigators. Someone had slipped. Someone was talking. A jailhouse rumor, a grudge, a leak, and the most perfectly executed heist in U.S. history was about to unravel. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. They called themselves the Brains. Not gangsters, not killers, not thugs, but masterminds. This wasn't a smash-and-grab crew. These were men with families, jobs, and lives that, on the surface, looked ordinary. But deep beneath that, they shared one thing in common: the hunger to pull off the most legendary heist America had ever seen. The man who orchestrated it all? Joseph "Big Joe" McGinnis. A career criminal with an IQ that would rival most college professors, McGinnis wasn't your typical crook. He had an eye for opportunity and a mind trained for precision. He didn't just want to get rich, he wanted to make history. And he knew that history required silence, strategy, and a crew that could follow orders. His first recruit, Anthony "Fats" Pino. A short, heavy-set man with a knack for logistics and a deep Rolodex of criminals who owed him favors. Pino was the connector, the one who could find the safecracker, the driver, the lookout. He brought them together one by one. Next came Stanley Gusciora, the quiet lock expert. A man who could feel the tumblers inside a safe like a pianist feels keys. He never smiled, never joked, but when he touched metal, it opened. Then there was James "Specs" Costa, a veteran of armed robberies with Coke bottle glasses and a reputation for being cold under pressure. He would later be known as the man who didn't blink when he held a gun to a guard's head. And then there was Joseph "Jazz" O'Keefe, the hothead. O'Keefe had a violent streak, a drinking problem, and a sense of paranoia that would ultimately cause cracks in the crew. But he was loyal, and in the planning phase, loyalty was everything. The crew also included Henry Baker, Adolph "Jazz" Maffei, and Vincent Costa, each with their own role. One was in charge of disguises. One monitored police patterns. Another handled surveillance on the Brinks building for over 6 months. That's right, they watched, waited, took notes. Brinks employees never suspected that their every move, lunch breaks, routines, security habits, was being logged into a notebook by a crew of thieves hiding in plain sight. The plan took 2 years to finalize. They knew they only had one shot, one mistake, and they'd all go down. Their target, the Brinks Armored Car Depot in Boston. The building was considered impenetrable. Steel walls, motion sensors, and armed guards at every corner. But McGinnis knew something that the Brinks team didn't. No matter how secure a building is, it's only as safe as the men guarding it. And he was right. Through months of surveillance, they discovered that the depot's vault was routinely opened in the late evening when the day's receipts were tallied. For a few minutes each day, all that cash, millions, sat unprotected. No alarms, no cops, just sleepy guards and a steel door left unlocked. That window, 17 minutes. They studied every angle, purchased look-alike uniforms, practiced entry routes, even rehearsed dialogue in case they encountered guards, right down to how to bark orders and where to stand. The getaway car was chosen carefully. A stolen Ford truck fitted with fake license plates. They even selected a garage 18 miles away to stash the money until the heat cooled off. No fingerprints, no talking, no spending for 6 years. That was the pact. Break it and you're dead. On January 17, 1950, it all came together. The night was cold. Snow blanketed Boston's cobbled streets, muffling the sound of footsteps. The Brinks depot loomed like a fortress, its walls hiding what they had planned for 2 years. 7 men in Halloween masks, navy peacoats, and rubber gloves emerged from the shadows. None of them spoke. They moved as one. As the guards buzzed open the back door, thinking it was just another routine, 5 men burst in, shouting, brandishing weapons. No shots were fired. Not one. The guards were bound and blindfolded. In less than 90 seconds, the robbers were inside the vault, stuffing canvas bags with cash, coins, checks, and payrolls from across the state. When they left, they were carrying $2.7 million. Today, that would be nearly $33 million. All in 17 minutes. And just like that, they vanished. The next morning, Boston exploded. Newspapers screamed headlines. Biggest robbery in U.S. history. FBI agents flooded the city. Police set up checkpoints. Everyone wanted answers, but they had nothing. The robbers left no fingerprints, no shells, no shoe prints. Even the canvas bags they used were common army surplus, impossible to trace. It was as if the robbers had vaporized. And for 6 years they did. No one saw them spend the money. No flashy cars. No new homes. They stuck to the plan. Don't touch the cash. Wait for the statute of limitations. If they could make it to January 17, 1956, they were untouchable. That was the deal. And they almost made it. But criminals rarely keep quiet, especially one like O'Keefe. Jazz O'Keefe wasn't built to wait. He drank, he gambled, he fought, and eventually he got arrested on an unrelated charge. While locked up, he demanded his share of the Brinks loot. When they refused, he snapped. O'Keefe had one weakness: pride. And that pride made him dangerous. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted to talk. And once he started talking, everything began to unravel. Nearly a year had passed since the Brinks robbery. The trail had gone cold. The FBI and Boston police had exhausted resources, followed false tips, even interrogated known mob associates. Still, the Brinks robbers remained shadows. No money had surfaced. No mistakes had been made, until someone broke. It started with a quiet tip. A woman called anonymously said she overheard her boyfriend brag about being in the Brinks job. Investigators didn't take it seriously. They'd heard dozens of similar calls. But something about her voice, panicked, rushed, scared, lingered. They took down the name, Joseph Specs O'Keefe. He wasn't unknown. O'Keefe had a rap sheet going back years: armed robbery, extortion, bookmaking. A hard man. But something had changed. Word on the street was O'Keefe had been shot in a gangland hit a few months earlier. And since then, he'd been volatile. Drinking more, talking more. The tip wasn't discarded. The FBI put eyes on O'Keefe. Back in 1950, after the robbery, O'Keefe had taken his cut and fled to Pennsylvania. For months, he laid low. But he was reckless, spent lavishly, dated multiple women. And eventually, he got caught on unrelated charges and served time in prison. While locked up, the other Brinks conspirators paid him silence money, about $7,000. But it wasn't enough. O'Keefe had expected more. He'd risked his life, and he didn't like being forgotten. When he got out, he demanded more cash. The rest of the crew, still hiding the bulk of the $2.7 million, refused. They were afraid O'Keefe might do something stupid. Or worse, flip. They were right. One night, O'Keefe walked into a bar in Dorchester and told an old associate he was tired of waiting, that he'd get back at those bastards one way or another. The FBI heard every word. They had wired the bar. Late one night, O'Keefe was ambushed. Shots were fired. He survived, but barely. When asked who shot him, he refused to answer. "No rats here," he growled. But the shooting rattled him. He knew where it came from, his own crew. They were trying to silence him permanently. It was a fatal misstep. Instead of scaring O'Keefe into silence, it pushed him straight into the FBI's arms. He requested a meeting. In exchange for protection, he would talk. What O'Keefe gave investigators was golden. He named names: Tony Pino, the mastermind; Adolphe Jazz Maffei, the muscle; Stanley Gusciora, his closest partner. He detailed the planning, the disguises, the dry runs, the warehouse where they practiced walking in darkness, even the inside tip on the Brinks delivery schedule. He described how the men wore identical outfits: navy blue coats, chauffeur caps, rubber gloves, and how one of them had even duplicated a Brinks key to bypass security. He laid out the 17 minutes that changed American crime forever. Even more critical, he revealed where the money had gone. According to O'Keefe, the $2.7 million had been divided, cleaned, and laundered through small-time gambling houses, car dealerships, and offshore accounts. But some of it, more than $1 million, was still hidden, buried, waiting. The FBI now had something they hadn't had in 11 months. Hope. Within weeks, agents swept across Boston. Tony Pino was picked up at his modest home in the North End. He didn't resist. "Took you long enough," he reportedly said. Jazz Maffei was nabbed while eating dinner with his family. He asked to finish his steak before leaving in cuffs. One by one, all 11 suspects named by O'Keefe were arrested. The FBI had enough evidence: surveillance photos, wiretaps, and most importantly, O'Keefe's sworn testimony, to take it to court. But they were racing against a deadline. Under Massachusetts law, the statute of limitations for robbery was 6 years. If they didn't indict all suspects before January 17, 1956, exactly 6 years to the day of the heist, they would walk free. It was now December 1955. Despite O'Keefe's cooperation, proving the case in court was hard. Much of the evidence was circumstantial. There were no fingerprints from the vault, no eyewitnesses inside Brinks, and the robbers had used disguises and gloves. The only solid link was O'Keefe. Defense attorneys argued he was lying for a plea deal, that he'd invented the whole thing to get revenge. The jury wasn't convinced. Yet, then, another bombshell. $57,000 in Brinks bills was found in a backyard wall, hidden behind false bricks. The homeowner was an old friend of one of the suspects. The bills were sequential, matching the stolen serial numbers. It was the break prosecutors needed. In January 1956, just 5 days before the statute expired, all 11 men were indicted for the Great Brinks Robbery. In court, the tension was unbearable. Reporters flooded the room. The FBI paraded O'Keefe in as the star witness. He testified for hours, walking jurors minute by minute through the heist. When the verdict came back, guilty, each man received a maximum sentence of life in prison. Justice had finally caught up. But the money? Most of it was never found. Though millions were missing, the Great Brinks Robbery had become the crime of the century. And just when the world thought it was over, a mysterious envelope arrived at the FBI. Inside was a photo of a wooded area and a note. "The rest is where the map leads. But the dead don't talk." No fingerprints, no signature. The case had closed. But the legend was only just beginning. The calm didn't last. Inside safe houses and dingy apartments, paranoia started growing like mold. The gang who had once moved like clockwork, silent, precise, united, was now splintering under the pressure of secrets and suspicion. They had pulled off the perfect robbery. But perfection doesn't last forever. And someone inevitably would crack. It didn't happen all at once. Like a slow leak in a tire, it began with the smallest betrayal. Joseph Specs O'Keefe had been loyal, up until he wasn't. He'd done his part. He waited years behind bars in Pennsylvania for a minor gun charge unrelated to the Brinks job. But while he sat, serving time, the rest of the gang wasn't helping him. No money, no messages, no visits. He was forgotten, and that was a mistake, because forgotten men talk. It started with a letter. In 1955, O'Keefe, bitter, broke, and betrayed, sent a warning to one of his former partners. The message was simple: pay me or I talk. The letter found its way to Vincent Costa, a friend of the gang. Instead of responding with money, Costa tried to shut O'Keefe up the old-fashioned way, by hiring someone to kill him. The attempt failed. O'Keefe was shot twice, but he lived. That was the final straw. Within weeks, O'Keefe was in talks with the FBI. And that, ultimately, was the death of the Brinks robbery. Once O'Keefe began talking, the entire case, once cold, once hopeless, came roaring back to life. The FBI had leads, and this time they moved fast. By early 1956, federal agents had arrested nearly the entire crew. Names that once struck fear were now being booked and fingerprinted. Joseph Big Joe McGinnis, the leader; Anthony Pino, the planner; Adolph Jazz Maffei, the silent enforcer; Thomas Sandy Richardson, the driver; Henry Baker, the inside man. One after the other, they fell. The trial was a media frenzy. Reporters packed the courtroom, scribbling furiously as secrets spilled. The gang that had once operated in shadows was now exposed under the blinding lights of justice. Each man denied involvement, but O'Keefe's testimony was damning. He named names, dates, conversations, details no outsider could know. Even without recovering the entire haul, the jury was convinced. In October 1956, nearly 7 years after the robbery, the verdict was delivered. All 8 surviving members were sentenced to life in prison. It was a historic moment. The largest cash robbery in American history solved. The criminals caught. Justice served. Or was it? Despite the arrests, only a small fraction of the stolen $2.7 million was ever recovered. Most of it had vanished, burned, hidden, or spent. FBI agents searched basements, fields, abandoned houses. They found weapons, disguises, even the original rope and tape used to bind the Brinks employees. But the money? Mostly gone. To this day, over $1.5 million remains unaccounted for. Adjusted for inflation, that's more than $18 million in today's value. The mystery of where it went, and who might have it, still haunts law enforcement. Years passed. The gang served their time. One by one, they aged, declined, died. But one man, Joseph Specs O'Keefe, remained a name no one could forget. After his cooperation, he was given a reduced sentence. He spent only 4 years in prison before walking free in 1960. He tried to live quietly. He moved to a small town, changed his name, but the past has a way of clinging to you. O'Keefe was always watching over his shoulder. He died in 1976, penniless, alone, but free. The same couldn't be said for the rest. Even decades later, criminal minds still study the Brinks robbery. Law enforcement lectures include it as a case study. Movies have been made, books written, because the question still echoes. How did they steal so much so fast? The answer lies in planning, obsession, and trust. The Brinks team rehearsed the heist more than 50 times in various locations, mapping every second. They studied guard patterns, knew when the alarm was off, and struck in a blizzard, banking on delayed police response. And they executed with chilling precision. From entry to exit, it took just 17 minutes. That's faster than your average pizza delivery. The Great Brinks robbery changed everything. It ushered in a new era of bank security. More cameras, tighter access, multi-person verification. And it taught law enforcement that organized heists weren't just movie plots, they were real threats. For criminals, it proved that even the perfect crime has a ticking clock. Because while you can outsmart the system, you can't outrun time, betrayal, or greed. The Brinks robbers dreamed of living rich. Beach houses, foreign cars, early retirement. But the truth is sobering. Most of them died broke, forgotten, serving time until their final days. The real reward? A few moments of glory. A newspaper headline. Place in history. Was it worth it? They might say yes. But the rest of us? we're left wondering who, if anyone, still has the missing millions, and whether someone, somewhere, still sleeps soundly knowing they got away with the loot of the century. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.